Welcome back to the HeavenEarth Church Podcast with Pastor Ross Stackhouse. I'm your host, Dr. Brad Miller, and today we're talking about the actual formation of the church, a church which has a vision to make a lasting impact in the community. So, Ross, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Yeah, thanks again, Brad. Appreciate you having this vision and doing it for us.
Awesome. Well, one of our earlier episodes, we a little bit talked about your faith journey and how you came to know the Lord personally and all the ups and downs and all the situations you went through which formed your own faith. And I think that was a real part of some sort of a calling or some part of the origins of the story of how even the HeavenEarth Church came to be. So tell me a little bit about that story, about the transition that kind of out of your faith story, which led you to eventually had the nudge or the opportunity to create what we now know as HeavenEarth Church.
Well, it starts honestly with a mentor of mine who was one of the, to put it nicely, earthiest Christian people I knew. He was kind of rough around the edges, He's also a pastor. And he invited me to go with him on to a church planters cluster meeting in Ohio. And I didn't have a reason to say no, so I went with him at that time. I was at Vanderbilt, like we talked about in the last podcast, studying to go on to get a PhD and teach in college. And he said to me while we were riding in the car, like, hey, man, I'm not trying to minimize your dream or any of that, but you're going to be a church planter someday. And of course, it sounds cliche, but I was like, I appreciate you saying that, but there's no chance that's going to happen. I've got kind of my direction set here. But to have somebody in your life who is really paying attention to your life and noticing your strengths and your gifts and speaks life into you, not in a way to try to control you, but to offer up a different vantage point of your life that may be even more kind of close to the truth than you're seeing. And so when I think about like how I got to this place, it starts with that story. And then to actually how we got here, fast forward, I ended up, I didn't get into PhD programs as we talked about. I got a call from a church in Carmel, a United Methodist church. They were wanting to start some new things. And looking back, that was in many ways a church plant within a church. But while I was there, I went back to school to get the requirements for ordination in the United Methodist Church. And one of the classes I took was a church planting class with a guy by the name of Ross Picardo. He was on staff with Mike Slaughter at Ginghamsburg for a while. And then Ross has planted a few churches. And so in 2016... part of that class, we had to write a proposal, an actual church plant proposal for an area, and I wrote it for this one.
When you wrote it for this one, you mean this actual location where we're at now, or just kind of generally about for a concept of a church plant?
No, I wrote it about Bargersville and Whiteland in Johnson County.
Wow.
At the time, because Nathan was the guy who said, you're going to be a church planter someday. Mm-hmm. I found myself in this church planting class. I was working in a church doing somewhat of a revitalization church planting work. And I started to really feel the nudge to start something new.
Yeah.
And I wanted to write a proposal for a place where you might actually do it. So I called church development or reached out to them. And church development is a extension of the United Methodist Church in Indiana. It's and I said, like, hey, if this were going to happen, what areas are you guys looking at? And they mentioned this one.
Yeah, how about that? Well, isn't that cool? It almost sounds like a God thing where there was your proposal came about the same time the need was being discerned, and now here you are. Let's take the leap then about how that actually happened, how the leap made to actually the application of all this vision and the need and the vision and that happened. And how did it come about that you actually became a pastor here, what became the HeavenEarth Church?
Yeah.
Tell me about some of those initial conversations that took place.
Well, as I was at St. Mark's and Carl, my heart, as we talked about in the last episode, is really for people who just haven't fit neatly into church at best, and at worst, they've really been alienated or harmed by the church. Felt like they had, religious trauma from Christianity or the church. And that continued to be a passion for me while we were doing quite a bit of that work at St. Mark's. But I was just feeling this fire to go like even more deeply into it. And I just had these kind of yearnings to like burning questions like, man, what would it look like to start a community that was really for that? It's for the people like Jesus would be for. And so I wrote the proposal with that in mind. And then fast forward, that was 2016, and 2018 was in my last year at St. Mark's. And I was really wondering what the next thing was. I knew my time was done at St. Mark's. And so it was the spring of 2018. I realized it was time. Like I had a friend at the time who was like, what are you so afraid of? And he said it in a way, he told me a couple stories that I was like, he's right. And Angela and I literally were discerning things to the point I was on my knees in my living room floor praying, and we were discerning what's next because we had another option out there that was presented to us, and we came to realize that wasn't right. And so then I sent this proposal to the director of church development at the time and said, like, I called her on the phone, said, hey, I think it's time to pull the trigger on this thing. And I had no idea how she was going to receive that. Mm-hmm. And she was like, send it to me and I'll give it to the cabinet. And so Emily Reese took that proposal, gave it to the cabinet, and then within a few days it was done. Mm-hmm. I was appointed here. My first day here was July 18th of 2018, and hit the ground running.
So you hit the ground running. So tell me how that looked to hit the ground running. So who were some of the first contacts you made? What were some of the first things you did? Did you just kind of take a deep breath and go, what have I got myself into? Well, what did you do in those first 3 months that you were on the ground running?
I had just vision I was so full of vision in life that I almost couldn't sit still, because back in 2009, I thought my life was building toward being a professor, and then I realized my life was building toward this. Like, my passion was for this. I really wanted to do church differently, like other people had done it. I wanted to, instead of launching something big, which that was the thinking of church planting for the longest time, which Brad. Yeah. It was all about launching something big and launching something attractional. With, if anyone's listening, that means like you really try to build something that is attractive. You might do that through like some really great sound and music and programs and facility, and you're just and at the front you're just marketing, inviting to get 250 or 300 people in your first Sunday, and then that you're probably going to lose at least 40% of that after the first Sunday, but you hope you retain enough. Right. I didn't want anything to do with that.
It was definitely the idea when I was the church planner. The first Sunday I launched a church, we had 260 in church. And
there you go.
But we immediately went to about 100.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was kind of...
And held on. That was what church planning was like in the mid-'90s. That's for darn sure. But let's talk about your situation here. So you decided to do something different. That wasn't your idea.
No.
Your idea was much more organic, much more grow from the ground up. Tell me how that came about and how it manifested itself in some of those early contacts that you made?
Yeah, I wanted to do what is it's become a fancy phrase now, the missional approach, but to me it's just the way of Jesus. Jesus came from far, and he moved in our direction, moved onto our turf and our zone, took on our skin, took on the skin of a poor, stonemason, and lived with people he spent 98% of his life in around this little freshwater lake, and he met people and ate with them and built relationships, especially relationships with people who probably didn't trust organized religion anymore. Mm-hmm. They may not have put it in that language. I wanted to do that too. I wanted to find out what's the good work that's already being done here. God's already here. I'm not bringing God here. What's going on? How do we become a part of it? One. And then two, how do I build relationships with those people who are maybe far away? And it doesn't matter how attractive we might make a church, they're never going to show up. So my first day on the ground, I went to Flapjacks in Bargersville. Sat there and talked with the waitress. And I went from there and to an apartment complex. Went to the office, met a couple people there. And then those were what my days were like, is that I would just meet as many people as I could, ask questions. I went to the same place to get my hair cut. Within a few months, I knew everybody's name there. I'd go to the same Kroger in Bargersville. I knew all the staff there. There's a staff person at Kroger who no longer works there, stopped working there in 2018, who helped come up with the name for the church. We had a launch team at the time. Meanwhile, I was forming a group of people because I was by myself. We were technically what's called a parachute drop. Building a team of people who may not be with the church long term, but they were going to help launch it. And so as I was meeting people, discerning vision, praying, discerning the vision and the mission that might become what the vision and mission of the church would be, came up with some names. And I took one name to the a barista at Starbucks at Kroger, inside Kroger. And I was like, hey, man, what do you think about this name? And he was like, oh, my gosh, I love that. He's like, it has the word near in it. And I was like, what? I'd never seen that. But obviously the N at the end of heaven and the EAR at earth.
Interesting.
And my whole theology is based on how Jesus says the kingdom of the heavens is near.
Wow.
Like how God is bringing the kingdom of the heavens to earth. Like eternity is nowhere else but here.
So it sounds like this was a really early on affirming moment for you that, okay, something's happening here.
Yeah.
I'm not just spitting in the wind here. Something is affirming here. So it sounded like these early conversations, for the most part, were affirming. But tell me about, you've mentioned this one at the barista at Kroger's. Were most of these conversations you have affirming? Were people for you, or are they just blowing you off? How those early conversations go?
Honestly, with people, this is what's ironic, and this is the problem I think the church is facing. I had pleasant conversations with people who want nothing to do with Christianity. I think it had to do with their character. Mm-hmm. They were kind people, and also with my approach. Like, I think I clearly made myself out to be like, I'm not here. I have no interest in proselytizing. I'm not going to tell you what's wrong with your life. I'm not even going to try to convert you. I just I really genuinely want to know you and listen to you. In that same Starbucks, I met a man who told me right up at the jump that he was atheist. He actually just ran for a representative position, and got to know him. I emailed him a picture of the name, and he emailed back. He's like, that is an amazing name. And I know some people are like, gosh, what a weird name for a church. I had one bartender way down the line who also said, I'm atheist AF. Your listeners can figure that out.
I got you. Yeah.
She said, it sounds like a cult name. So not everybody has loved it. But all those people were pleasant. The toughest conversations I had sometimes were with Christians.
Of course. Interesting. And just to be clear, the name of the church is HeavenEarth Church, with no space between
No
the
space.
N and the N of heaven and the E of earth.
No.
And I had never put the N-E-A-R part about
No.
near there for that. So what does that name mean to you now? Tell me about that. Does it resonate with you? Is that the name you come up with, or?
Yeah, I came up with it, and then our team picked it. We had several names, and the launch team, it was unanimous. And I know, again, like some people always say heaven and earth. They want to put a space in there, and I get it. It doesn't make sense. It's kind of a wonky name, but I still love it because it represents Jesus's vision. It's the whole vision of Christianity, that it's what we're celebrating during this season, during Advent, that heaven comes smashing into earth. There is no space. There's no space between heaven and earth because heaven is smashed into earth. And Jesus says ultimately at the end, Revelation 21, there's the vision of the city of heaven coming down to earth. And it says God has made his home among mortals. So like for all these years we've thought that, or we've been told that being a Christian, you die and you go to this disembodied paradise heaven that's far, far away and it's not here. Like this is the venue for eternity. And so that's why what we do here and now is connected to eternity. And that's the kinds of things we're trying to teach people. And I'm still trying to learn.
Sure. Well, you just kind of gave a bit of an exposition with the vision of the church, and that's great. Tell me how you then share that vision, which you just shared here in this context, in kind of a sentence or two with people. If somebody gets online or calls you up, well, all right, I think about this church here. How do you explain that vision in a concise way?
I explain it in terms of like people have often felt a gap, a disconnect, and they felt it more and more between religion and life. Mm-hmm. They don't think there's legitimacy to it. They don't think that the church offers legitimate solutions for hope and healing for communities. Our church is about reconnecting like the best things of Jesus to what's happening here and now, the suffering. So when we say we want to be a neighborhood of friends who bring heaven to earth, which is our vision, the vision of the church, like if we're doing this well, we'll be a neighborhood of friends who bring heaven to earth. The heaven to earth part is there should be a tangible difference in our community because we exist here.
Sure. So if you've said that, and then on your website, I know it says basically if you don't feel like you fit in church, you might fit in here.
Yeah.
Have you encountered those people there, and have we seen any evidence of that, of some of those people actually fitting in here? And how did that be kind of a part of the process of building a body, building those actual neighborhood of friends there?
I just heard somebody say in a meeting this last week, one of our meetings, they said, I've never experienced church being done this way. I didn't even know it could be done this way. And like, now I'll never go back. And another guy joked like, yeah, like you've ruined church for us for the rest of our lives. But honestly, I don't think we're actually not doing anything that novel. We're honestly just being honest. We're just trying to strip out the ego from the church experience and just trying to like simply ask, what did Jesus say and do, and what would it look like if we try to do that? And by committing to some like simple things like our core values and authenticity, yeah, like the leader of Recovery Church right now, by her own admission, was agnostic, showed up at our Recovery Church Wednesday night meeting, and she didn't come in the door and we were like, hey, we didn't look at her and go like, but what if you died tonight? Do you know where you're going? we just welcomed her and said like, hey, we're glad you're here. And we named like, yeah, our meeting is a Jesus-centered recovery meeting, but if you don't believe in Jesus, you're welcome here.
Sure, sure.
And then she just kept showing up. And then eventually she decides like Jesus is the one for her. Now she leads Recovery Church. And yeah.
And if I understand, she was recently baptized, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's that transition that takes place, but it took place not because somebody with a giant Bible with a million ribbons came and whacked her against the side of the head with the Bible. It came out of relationship. It came out of authenticity. It came out of this community building. And those are the values that you really are putting forth, and being this warm, inviting space rather than a space that some people have experienced have been somewhat the opposite, a cold and kind of a distant space. So what are you doing here that's helping to manifest that? Like if somebody comes here for worship, or if somebody comes here for some other event here, what are they going to experience here that's going to be this warm, inviting communal place to be?
Well, our vision is we want to be a neighborhood of friends who bring heaven to earth. So in other words, if we're doing this the way we mean to do it, that's where we'll be in the future. We'll look at this and it'll look like a neighborhood with people who maybe don't look the same, have different backgrounds, different ideas, different socioeconomic status. But like my neighborhood, like it's very different, but we have a similar hope. We want to be that here if we're doing it right. But the way we bring that to fruition is mission. Mm-hmm. That's like, what are we here to do? Why do we exist? And the first pillar, the abbreviated mission is we exist to make a lasting impact in our community. But the three pillars that follow are how we bring it to fruition. Pillar one is we want to build relationships with all kinds of neighbors. So you were saying it. We are all about authentic relationships. So our small groups, which you're in one now, Brad, they have a purpose that's simply twofold. We want to help people build a community of friends they can trust, care for, and root for. Full stop. And we want to help them know Jesus and practice His way together. Trust-based, authentic community is hard to find and it's rare. But that's what we hope people experience when they show up. That's why I sit on a stool and I'm just sitting and talking with people. I'm just Ross. We're just trying to be vulnerable, authentic, genuine, earnest, honest. Like, hey, we're just here on the same wavelength, like trying to find out what this Jesus person is about.
Yeah, for instance, when people come to a worship experience here, I think you even use language more like a gathering, and it's not so much a sermon or a message, it's a conversation.
Yeah.
So tell me kind of, for those people who might be listening to this, and just how are people going to have that experience? You know, you said they're going to have this warm, inviting experience, but what are other, not just you, but what are other people going to say to them if they talk to people among the body?
I hope that what they say is, and I've watched it, our first core value is we want to meet people where they are and see them as masterpieces. I hope it's not even just what we say to people. I hope it's how people feel seen when they come in. Like when they come in the door, or our folks are out at a restaurant, or they're out at the store. I kind of hope we're all infected with this amazing truth that each person you meet is God's masterpiece. And I hope that's people experience that, like not a hospitality of like, okay, we're being nice to you so we can get something out of you or get you to do something. Mm-hmm. But like we're genuinely excited about who you are. So that's the first thing. But also, yeah, like, you know, Ashley is our director of Operation Hospitality and Joy is what we call it. She'll only be that for a short while longer because she's transitioning off staff. But I think Ashley in many ways represents like the kind of hospitality we're about. Ashley, like love is a core value for her, and she embodies that when she sees people. And we hope that's just spreading, like that people, like when somebody walks in the door, they're a friend to us.
Yeah. So you've emphasized a lot of this friendship, the neighborliness that people can experience. root for one another. I love those concepts there. And then, but I also see it extend in how you are extending the mission of the church in creative partnerships in the community. So it's not just a bubble of people who are friends.
Right.
It is people who are part of friends who are doing something for the community. Tell me a little bit about how that is manifested in kind of the vision of the church to be you want to make a lasting impact on the community.
Yep.
Tell me how that plays out.
Yeah. That's also where that neighborhood vision comes in. This isn't just us. We're one kind of corner of the neighborhood, so to speak, the folks of Heaven Earth. But we have partners that we work with that are also a part of the neighborhood, bringing heaven to earth. So for instance, an example is like we built a partnership with an organization called Upstream Prevention early in my time here. I was part of a youth-focused drug prevention coalition called Empower Johnson County, which is one of their coalitions. And I got to know the executive director, and we started working on some things together. And then she came to me one day and said, I've been around a lot of meetings where we talk about housing and the need for affordable housing here. And I think it's time to do something. I think we need to start a housing coalition, and I think it needs to be housed under HeavenEarth Spaces Incorporated, which is a 501c3 nonprofit our church created, whose mission is to create affordable spaces for nonprofits and families. We did that because we learned about what are the most pressing challenges of our community, and when we looked at all those, housing is it. Recovery housing, transitional housing for folks who have been criminal justice involved, folks who are struggling economically. Housing is where it starts and where it ends. And so Kathleen, who's the executive director of Upstream Prevention, said, we need to start a housing coalition. And so we did. And so now HeavenEarth Spaces Incorporated has a housing coalition, and the president of that coalition is a member of our church. And we're creating a residency rental program that's transitional housing. We're raising money currently to purchase a lot that the town of Whiteland approached us and asked us to buy so that we could build a duplex on it and make it affordable housing.
Yeah. Well, that's some amazing stories here. And let me kind of bring it around to this, just reflect with you a second. And now I want to give you just 2 bits of information to kind of close this conversation, which will have an ongoing aspect to it as well. But it seems like it really started with a spark of the holy. That is, you had a calling that came into, intersected with a need personally. So I believe a lot of things come from that kind of fire and bush kind of experience, all kinds of calling experiences that happened. So that's a powerful manifestation that you had there. And then the opportunities came here in this community, in this Whiteland, Bargersville, Johnson County community, and some people stepped forward to be a part of it and bought in and adhered to the vision is now being lived out to make a lasting impact in the community, and these values of warmth and authenticity and experiencing Christ in a abiding way, not in a intimidating way. I see those things happening in such a way. And I think that means that HeavenEarth Church is a place where that connection, I love that, where the N and the E come together, there is a connection between heaven and earth.
Yeah.
Part of the intersection is right here. But let's bring it around to this, Ross. When was that moment for you personally? And then we're going to talk about it in a minute here about somebody else. You personally, you kind of had that aha moment that this is happening. That we are a church here, we are a community here, and that there is something here that's alive and vibrant, that has that's going to make an impact, and it's going to be able to go. It's going to go here. When was that moment for you?
I don't know if I've had it yet.
Okay.
No, I mean, I'm always it's a blessing and a curse. I'm kind of a vision person at heart, so I'm always looking to the horizon. there's a scene in one of the Star Wars movies where Yoda says to Luke Skywalker, I forgot his name for a minute, like, you're always looking to the horizon, you're never looking right here.
Oh, yeah.
Right in front of your nose. And like, but I sitting at coffee today with a friend, he actually asked me, like, have you celebrated at all? And I like, that happened, it wasn't that long ago when we were actually celebrating the Lord's Supper together. And as I watched people approach for that, I just saw the eclectic group that we had.
Yeah.
And how we were gathering at a table, and it was special. And that's honestly like what this is about. We want to help people experience the warmth and beauty and belonging and wonderful transformation that happens with Jesus at his table.
Yeah. Then tell me about one of those people then. That's where I want to kind of end our conversation here today. We've talked about kind of the formation of the group, of the body. Mm-hmm. We've talked about you. Now let's talk about that story, that person. You said about this warm transformation took place. Tell me a story about someone you've seen, or maybe a family or a situation here, that is somehow impacted by the mission and ministry of HeavenEarth Church has been transformed.
Oh man, there's quite a few. So I have to pick one. I think about recently, actually the family that will light the third candle for Advent this Sunday. There was a man I knew from my time in Carmel who, we had gotten to know each other, and I'd helped him through some trying times. He's from Mexico, and he was getting married, and he reached out to me a year or so ago and asked if I'd be willing to officiate a wedding for him and his fiancée. And he has 3 kids. She had 1. And we did that. And then she got pregnant with twins. So now there were 6. A real blended family. And they came here and wanted to have their twins baptized. And I just looked upon that as we had part of it in the baptism liturgy in Spanish and English. It's a beautiful family. Erica's African-American. Ugo, like I said, is from Mexico. And they're just like wonderful people. And to celebrate that new life with them, and to get to see them like light the Advent candle and be in community with them has been a real blessing. And yeah, that's a story I think
awesome.
of.
Well, that's awesome. That's kind of an embodiment of what we've been talking about here, which is a sense of life transformation that happens within an environment that's authentic, that's communal, that's warm, that's abiding. And I think that's what the story is just beginning for HeavenEarth Church. And we thank you for sharing kind of the origin story of the church and how it got started, just a few years ago, and how we are situated right now. And it's an ongoing story, isn't it? It's not, this isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning. And we'll hear a lot more stories of the people who make up this body of a church that indeed is looking to make a lasting good impact in our community.
Yes.
So Ross Stackhouse, thanks for being our
Thank you, Brad.
Our guest today on the HeavenEarth Podcast.